Second day of Shell, around 11ish. Tom paused in their walk along the commons at a bench, and glanced down at his omnipad. That was Sarasi at the University Legal Department. She checked for Ganya, and under Shilvanti law, you're officially my family now. Stuffing away the omnipad, he shook his head, gathering up the sacks of clothes, while Zinshiki regarded him.
You seem surprised, she said, then added, or are you disappointed?
I am not disappointed, but I am surprised. When I offered to adopt Desi, I was told the time involved was prohibitive, but it seems the extra bureaucracy only applies to Shilvanti children. The laws aren't so particular with non-Shil. Tom shrugged as Zinshiki regarded him, unsure of how he felt about the matter, but determined not to call the girl a disappointment. For her part, she gave nothing away other than blinking at him twice, and for the umpteenth time he reminded himself to learn what all that was about. I would have thought their laws apply to all citizens regardless of species, but it seems to be a loophole for native laws and customs. Zinshiki wasn't just a challenge. She tested him all the time. It felt like she was looking for some point of weakness, and she probably was. While that might be reasonable with a stranger, the notion of living like that all the time seemed outlandish. Surely the Persian didn't live like that with their own family. Or did they? Even removed from their home world and separated from the threat of starvation, Zinshiki still pushed. An old memory bubbled up, but it was cold out and it made his side ache. He wanted to get home. Remind me to tell you about Korean sometime.
I'm listening now.
Zinshiki took the hint and gathered up her packages.
What planet are Koreans from?
The walk back to Tom's rooms wasn't far. He managed to get her in the same dorm as Desi, and it seemed practical to save on the cost of the hotel before moving her into her own dorm room tomorrow. Earth. A lot of humanity was broken up along national identities before the landing. Tom ran his thoughts over the problem as they walked. I suppose it's like your different warbands? While there was still the matter of catching Zinshiki up in different classes, though Desi was going to ask her to join their study group. There would be time to see how much he owed Desi for that kindness later on.
Perhaps.
Zinshiki shifted a package between her arms and ignored the stares as other students passed by. Her tail twitched continuously.
These Koreans were fierce warriors?
They could be, yes. They were locked in a civil war when the Imperium landed, though it was sort of on hold. Tom sighed inwardly. Might as well make the point while they walked. It was as good a time as any. I visited South Korea once. Honestly, I didn't understand a lot about their culture or why they had a reputation for being pushy. As it happened, I met a Korean there and we got talking. He explained that when the war was hot, the entire country was as barren as a parking lot. If you didn't push to get what you needed, you starved.
I can understand this.
Zinshiki looked mildly interested.
So they ate their own out of respect, like my people?
This was not going the way he'd hoped, and he wasn't even about to go down any of the rabbit holes of ugly rumor yawning open before him. The thing is, they retained a reputation for being pushy, long after their country had recovered and they didn't need to. It was a survival trait for them, and the reputation survived the need. She nodded at that.
Then their push to survive was successful.
They did in the South. Around the time I visited, they were something like the 5th largest economy on the planet. They went from having nothing to that in something like, 30 short years?
If they pushed harder, perhaps they would have been the 4th largest.
This was not going the way he wanted, at all. That said, Zinshiki was damned hard to read. Yes, there was a reasonable chance she didn't understand the point he was trying to make. On the other hand, there was every chance she understood his point perfectly. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. If at first you don't succeed. That will be a topic in my class eventually, but the point is that they got hit with a reputation for a situation they outgrew. Now you're here, I hope you'll consider that. Tom set the point out, but didn't push. She'd either get it, or she wouldn't. As they walked, Zinchiki ignored the stare she got from the other students, but her tail twitched back and forth in what he suspected was amusement. "You seem happy. Do you like the new uniform?"
It is preferable to the purple and blue of Sochet, although the black and white worn here looks somewhat bland on Shovanti. Zinchiki shrugged. Of course, I make this look good.
Points for pride, then. Though he had to admit that Zinchiki's steely grey fur set the university colours off nicely. Not much point in asking what she thought of human flesh tone. They passed 2 students on the commons who stared at her openly, and she did almost smile. The effect was disconcerting for them, and her tail twitched again. "I'm glad you like it." Tom shifted the package he was carrying and stopped at his front door. They were on time to make the phone call. So much for a quiet day off. "You know, you don't have a warband backing you up now. While I'm your hackhat, I'm also a professor here. I have to be impartial. You can't threaten to eat people or use violence as a crutch." Green Eyes regarded him, before looking pointedly at the sword cane in his left hand.
So, humans lack the concept of irony?
As an emotional crutch. Exasperation was creeping in, though he had to concede the point. You don't need to fight for a name. You're getting that from me now. Heck, you can even start calling yourself Evil Heart now, if you want. What is that impediment anyway? Zinchiki's tail definitely twitched. Watching her body language was going to have to be a thing until he picked up the particulars.
Carol!
She practically purred it. Seriously? Tom shook his head. You were going to kill me to be called Carol?
Your accent is atrocious.
Her ears flickered back, but she actually canted ahead as she studied him.
Still, you sound doubtful. I thought all of this was understood.
It is, Tom grumbled. My mother's name was Carol. With her interest in his family, she was bound to find out eventually. It just seemed like the universe hadn't been playing fair all week long. What was one more Acme anvil dropping from the heavens? She arched an eyebrow at him.
Then it was predestined.
Of course she believes in karma. Tom felt the anvil hit and drew a long breath to steel himself. When she didn't want to get a point, dealing with Zinchiki was like going for a jog knee-deep through molasses. The point, which I am finally trying to reach here, is that you don't need to foster a reputation for violence or act like you're going to eat someone.
That is true. However, I could still eat someone on my own time.
Zinchiki set down her packages by the sofa and regarded him coolly.
That was humor.
I'm in stitches. She regarded her left hand as she flexed her claws.
I thought it was only a bandage.
Look, make yourself comfortable. I have to call the head administrator at Sochet and get your grades transferred so this whole thing is sorted. Tom eased himself down in the chair and drew out his omnipad. He definitely felt like he'd lost this round, but at least things were getting done. She was cut enough to let me call on a shell. Zinchiki stopped sorting the packages from her bag and regarded him for a moment.
It is not a courtesy. I did say she wanted to be rid of me.
I'm going to look at it as a courtesy. Tom punched in the number he'd been given and waited for the call to connect. It never hurts to show some appreciation.
I saw how that worked for you at the faculty reception, she said skeptically.
Body language might not translate well, but her tone spoke volumes.
I had to explain it to my birth mother on the way home.
Somehow, he had to explain there were better ways of doing things than violence or the threat of violence. Getting the idea through to her wasn't going to be easy. Thankfully, the call to Vemi Rasani connected, and he could pay attention to literally anything else for a few minutes. Miv set her omnipad to speaker mode, and set it on the dresser while she went through her closet. Back home, Leia was doing the same, and it let them keep busy while talking.
You're absolutely certain about this? Miv took a critical look at the suit on the hanger before tossing it on the bed in the possible pile. We don't want to embarrass him. I'm positive. There was a rustle of something in the background before Leia spoke up again. Zinshiki asked me about the wedding, so I asked why. She said that he said, all we need to do is jump over a broom with him, and he was planning to do it with us before the regular ceremony. Miv, I know you keep an eye on him, but he nearly got stabbed. We even have my mother's blessings now, so we need to get this done. Am I arguing? You kept an eye on him too, but he was nearly eaten. I only wanted to be certain. Miv tossed down a blue dress and jutted her tusks at the air, since Leia couldn't see. It hadn't been either of their faults, but Leia still should have told her what was going on. You said you spoke with her about it? Goddess Leia, we always wanted children, and I'm thrilled to have Desi. But how can we be good mothers to her? She's just a different species, Miv. I've taught 9 different species in my classes. Just treat her like a young person. Show care and do what you always do. I've talked to her. You'll be fine. There was the sound of something slamming shut. Probably the dresser. Anyway, he doesn't have any idea. Also, what do you think about Blue? I certainly haven't told him. I had a word with Ganya, so it's sorted out. 7 o'clock, the day after tomorrow. You have plenty of time to get here after school, and we can keep it to a quiet affair. Miv looked at the blue suit critically. Desi had gotten Tom's blue uniform repaired, and he'd certainly want to wear it for the official ceremony. Plain as it was, it did have a certain style, and it meant the world to him. Not blue. We can't all wear blue. Why not? There was the sound of more things being moved around over the line. What's wrong with blue? You remember the outfit I wore when I married Chanda? You can't seriously call what you had on an outfit, Miv balked. It wasn't a topic she'd ever expected to bring up again, but Shalea's marriage to Chanda had been something of a meeting of minds at the time. That was more a notion than an outfit. I was young. Besides, weddings are for men, not for women. Half the women I know would be happy just to bump fists and go down on them on the drive home. Don't be crass. I've met your social pool too, you know. The only difference I can see is they'd buy him something pretty afterward. Leia! You do remember when Elrina and Aristi married Cameron? Fine. Anyway, that outfit made my mothers happy, but fine, not blue. Leia's sniff carried over the line. We still have to pick something. I don't own one of those kimono things. Purple was too much. Black is too much like school clothes. Red is for after. You don't want blue. I thought you wanted something besides your house colours, but why? I did. Maybe you're right, though. Miv looked at the small pile on her bed critically. If it's just going to be something informal, what's the harm? Good. That's settled then. I'll come straight over after class tomorrow and hide out at your place. All right. Miv picked up the first outfit and eyed the other deep green clothes in that section of her closet. At least it would make for an easy choice. This idea of not seeing each other before a wedding seems odd, doesn't it? She said he said that it's part of their tradition too. How are you going to disappear? I've set it up with Ganya and Jama. I just need to give them a call. Really? Well, you can just tell Professor Barai I want to thank her personally too. Tom snarled over the on-the-pad at Vemi Rasani, and his voice dripped with sarcasm. I hadn't thought about how to finish the section she started teaching, which she should have, until you brought it up. And what's that supposed to mean? Rasani said archly. He couldn't see the Sochet's head administrator, and who knew where she was, but he could still remember that smug, superior expression she'd worn all week, and he heard it in her voice now. I mean, I wasn't sure of a metaphor for a world war, but after hearing about how badly she fucked up, I have a whole new insight into the realms of pure Turok shit. Tom stared at the on-the-pad in his hands, and glared at it in the hope of burning her alive on the other end. Oh, and Zinshiki isn't that being. She's the daughter of a dame now, thank you very much.
I think that means she outranks you.
Suck on that, you...
What? Now you listen to me, Warwick. Exchange teacher or not, you can't talk to me like... Oh, I'm not talking to you as a teacher. I'm talking to you as a parent. You are not, and I mean not, going to fail her in every class. She isn't quitting. This is a transfer, he snarled. He loathed name-dropping, but Rosani was a bully, a bigot, and a clown. It was the kind of language he understood, and he'd finally had enough. Lady, don't forget I know the minister. Just try testing me, and I will rain so much hellfire down on your sanctimonious ass, they'll be using the glowing crater as a landing beacon from orbit. It's the push of a button to send those records over, so I'll expect them in our database tomorrow. Are we clear? Rosani snarled something back over the line, but mixed in there somewhere was a tacit affirmation. That was all he needed, and he closed the call and glared at the device. Damned arrogant bitch. Water ran downhill naturally, but sometimes you had to remove some stubborn boulders before it went where you needed it to go. Not the best timing, though. So much for the topic of violence or the threat of violence.
That went well.
Zinshiki regarded him from the couch and batted her eyes at him. Her tail flickered once. Not now, Carol. Zinshiki sat in the room and idly examined her purchases for a second time. To her surprise, the woman at the shop knew of a tailor off campus who had sought out the proper holes in the skirts and pants suitable for her Asaic. That would be a vast relief. After spending the last year forced to have it choked or hanging out loose, the Shorfanti seemed oblivious, but thank the Dark Mothers a male had never seen her like that. Soché's garments had come out of a machine. A hunter should wear things possessing the qualities of utility or elegance. The Sochet uniforms lacked both. The new clothing was actually crafted, and the new blazer didn't bunch up under her bandolier. If she had to wear a school uniform, this was acceptable. She looked around the rooms again. They certainly weren't much to look at. Usually when someone lived in a place, they made their mark upon it. It came to feel used, comfortable, a reflection of the owner. Every Persian warband had their own ship, and everyone had their space upon it. Large or small, it was set aside for themselves. Distinct, just as every Persian ship was distinct. Not mere transport. They were homes, and each was different from the next. She felt a pang of loneliness for her sister, but it was too early to call. It would smell of dejection. Besides, her elder sister, Pudviri, might get her name first, but her name would be best. She had even secured land for the warband, at least indirectly. Herds, though they were Tauroks, not the Varastiki roaming Pesh. Profitable for the family, though, and Pudviri could stew in her own jealousy. The band mothers would have things in motion, and it wasn't for Pudviri to question. If she was not there to enjoy the triumph, what of it? She was on a long journey, scouting for the family. These humans were something new, and knowing about them would be useful. The knowledge could benefit the warband, and even if they never dealt with humans again, it was something to be traded. It had value. Around the room there was the furniture, which looked sized for a Shavanti, though here and there were personal touches. The desk was wood of a kind she'd never seen, and both it and the chair were sized for a human. Something from his home, then. There were pictures on the shelves, though not as many as she might have expected. Warwick had been here for months, and the room still looked barren. A Persian would have mementos until they had trophies, claiming such space as her own, and immediately set about making it a proper reflection of it being owned. Perhaps humans did not share that trait. There were books on the shelves, though they were not written in Vatica. She had already installed a translator in her Omnipad, but the volumes seemed unimportant at this point. She could look at them later. They were a curiosity in printed paper, but one that would wait. At least she knew he enjoyed reading. That was not unpromising. The kitchen was just off the living area, and she looked through the cupboards. More alien food. Her ears flickered back briefly at the thought of being netted in that cursed restaurant, but as an unexpected bounty, chicken had to be a gift from Mishran, the Dark Mother who watched over fate. Still, until she learned what might be poisonous, there was no purpose in more than a cursory examination. So far as she could tell, there was nothing but food, though her sense of smell detected some tantalizing aromas. Again, something for later. Strolling idly into the bedchamber, she looked about. Again, very little in the way of personal decoration, though a thorough investigation of the dresser was revealing. More of the clothing was his, though a drawer and some of the closet were set aside for Shulvanti outfits. She sniffed at one. It had the scent of Mivere upon it. So then, Tom Warwick was to be her Proft Hachak, and Mivere and Shalea were to be his wives. Those were bonds worth considering. Unlike the teachers at Sochet and the other students, they had been approachable. Shalea had been kind. Her mother's had even been understandable. And then it seemed there was also this Desi person to meet. Picking methodically through the closet, she found it buried in the back. It felt revealing that it lay concealed behind 3 boxes. Running her finger over the shining fabric, she examined the knot with care, memorizing it well enough before slipping open the cords. It was a longclaw. No mere longclaw like the one concealed in his cane. The work upon this spoke of something greater. The scabbard was a rich brown like good earth, speckled with gold. The hilt was a deep white, wrapped with dark leather of some sort. But the fittings were magnificent. The crosspiece was unfamiliar, a thin circle of dark iron inlaid with gold and threads of silver. One hand went to her bandolier where her daggers lay. They were not as ornate as her birth mother's, but they were functional. This? She had never beheld the like. Drawing the blade forth ever so lightly, she relished the cool whisper of steel as it fell from the scabbard. The long blade was lightly curved, and she took care not to touch the steel as she examined it. A fine pattern wove along the edge, and the steel had an odd look that took her a moment to recognize. It gave her a shock. The metal was folded. Not once, but so many times it would be impossible to count. This was no blade forged by a machine. Someone had crafted it by hand, and she gazed at it longingly, and in a fit of impulse ran it ever so lightly along a small tuft of her fur. The hair parted effortlessly, as if cut by a razor. The temptation to look at it more was great, but she put it back, making certain the cord was tied just as she'd found it, and the boxes were replaced in their proper order. There was a pang inside her, though. If Warwick were not her Hachakt, she would have surely made off with it as her prize. Still, it paid to be pragmatic about such things. Warwick might express a desire to be passive, but the instances his temper rose. The presence of this blade? It all showed there was a hunter underneath. Prowling carefully into the bathroom was unrevealing, but after discovering the longclaw, she could forgive anything. Well, almost anything. Surely there had to be something. Some storage area. No hunter had only one trophy to call his own. She sniffed, and walked back to the living area, looking about once more. Warwick was gone to see another professor, back in an hour or two. It was endearing to be trusted by one's Hakakt. At least, it would be if they were Pezrin. Of course, with a Pezrin, they would surely check her work when they returned. After all, there were expectations. Any fool could kill, but it needed skill to win a name. After that, it was a matter of showing true worth by providing for the warband. Sometimes that required combat, and sometimes it took stealth and light fingers. There was honor when you brought something back of worth to the family, most of all when it was done without a trace. With a human, who knew? Regardless, Pezrin did not take from their own family, and she would not take from her Hachakt. There was the principle of the thing. House? That was what Warwick called his automated system before leaving for his appointment. Yes, Zinshiki. The automated system didn't mangle her name very badly, but no matter. It was a machine. There was no disrespect. Zinshiki looked around her for a moment, considering what would be most revealing.
House, what does Professor Warwick do for entertainment? Prioritized by frequency of use.
Recurring selections include access to the collected music library, access to the collected video library, access to the university datanet, access to the planetary datanet, access to... Stop. This deserved proper consideration. Music was deeply personal to most species, and it seemed he was fond of it.
Replay the last song.
An odd combination of musical instruments arose before the vocals began. It was a male voice. Even to our untrained ear, it was a good voice too. Strong and unwavering. Still, the words were a mystery, spoken in what she presumed must be human. Well, that was easily dealt with.
House, end music. Display the lyrics on the monitor and translate to Vatica.
You think that people would have had enough of silly love songs. But I look around me and I see it isn't so. Some people want to fill the world with silly love songs. And what's wrong with that? A human love song? That was nice. Still, it was not in keeping with a hunter. The selection must be a matter of chance.
House, list pieces of music referencing battle or hunting.
Zinshiki considered what else might be of use to. Password.
Ah.
Her smile was fierce. Warwick was a hunter, and she knew from hunting him that he tended to bury his trail, but perhaps not so well in the privacy of his home as he should. These automated systems were stubborn but stupid. The band mothers taught every kid how to get around such things. Settling down on the sofa and stretching languidly, she ran her tongue along one fang.
House, what is the total size of all personal data on file?
164 decahedrals.
Does that include or exclude password-protected files?
Included.
What is the file size of all unrestricted data available to me?
143 decahedrals. 21 decahedrals was a great deal of data, depending on the average file size.
House, what was the file size of the song just played?
0.032 millihedrals. Presuming the love song was on the small end, that was enough for hundreds of files.
Display restricted files. Password, Earth.
Password not accepted. It was a long shot, but they sometimes worked. What did she really know about Warwick? He was a hunter. He had carried a longclaw and had a beautiful example hidden in his closet. He came from Earth. He was set to marry. He cared about history and minded his... No, it was all too murky. He would not set up a password in the name of his wives. She knew literally nothing about his past on Earth that would help. His home was unrevealing, though he liked to read. Stepping over to the bookcase, she pulled up the translator on her Omnipad. Titles scrolled past on the various volumes as she looked them over. There. That volume had the most wear upon its cover. She ran the translator over the title and read it twice, checking the pronunciation.
Display restricted files. Password, Santiago.
Password accepted. Displaying files. The night shift could be slow. On the last night of Shell, the objective was usually spending time with her friends or deep in her studies. Even so, a yowling peasant hopping around the room screaming at the top of her lungs was hard to miss. Captain Solani brought the feed up and watched the monitor with growing apprehension. Kalani, have we got a translation on this yet? It's coming through now. Oh dear. Sergeant Kalani was a highly trained death's head commando. She'd proven herself over the course of 2 tours and served with distinction before being joined into Solani's pod. Aside from a damnable fascination for that cube thing in the library, she was an outstanding NCO. Of course, there was also her tendency to get unaccountably squeamish at the damnedest things. She'd seen Kalani walk through fire, blood, and muck. But when she got that straight-laced tone... I'm not going to like this, am I?
Bless the goddess. If you were a Shovanti man, I'd be spending the rest of the day calming you down.
Indara set her omnipad down and looked at her husband with concern.
Sal says Ferry's going to be fine. They're on the shuttle to the hospital now. I heard her in the background, and she sounded quite lively.
I heard half of it from where I'm sitting. Adam crossed his arms and scowled. Ferry didn't cuss that much when that bitch stabbed her with a hairpin on Percival.
Given her reputation, we all presumed Duchess or Lorne would come quietly.
Classy shrugged, as she thought back to one of their earlier detention runs.
She was embarrassed.
You presumed. We all knew Lorne was using child labor in her operation. Adam's eyes were hard as battle steel, and Indara thought about mixed blessings. Her husband was definitely not a Shovanti man, but sometimes the trade-offs were nerve-wracking. He reached up to rub his forehead, and she saw the loving husband replace the ice-cold operative. She sounds pissed.
Sal says Ferry has first-degree burns over most of her body. The fire control teams arrived and are working on the blaze. Thank goodness for the rain.
Indara looked at the messages waiting for her attention as Princess Indara Tazu, and they weighed on her bitterly. But for the demands on her now, they could all have been out in the field. It was tearing at her inside, and she could see it on Adam's face. If she'd been unarmored, they would have lost Ferry.
I know you wanted to be there.
Yes, I did, and still do. Adam drew a deep breath and looked up to meet her eyes. He looked miserable. I understand why we're here, Classy. I get it. Really, I do, and I'm okay. Ferry, Slip, and Cell are as good as they get. You need me at your side, and you need to be here. That's just how it came down. But I want to be there when we catch this bitch.
We both do,
Indara nodded. Even after all these years together, there was still a knot of tension every time her royal duties came into play. The knot loosened just a bit.
Isn't killing poor Satora enough? Who traps that campsite with a thermal grenade? I know we almost missed it, but if anyone from the militia had spotted it during the search...
Anyone without armor on would have been fried alive. Adam clasped his hands together and steepled them below his chin, lost in thought. No one needed to do that. They didn't leave a trail, they were toying with us. Taking Satora in the dead of night? That's cold. Killing her in the woods? That's ice cold, but if it's somehow political. She was a child, and I can't forgive that, but there has to be a motive we can follow. But this? Trying to ice any search and rescue folks that came looking? Someone only pulls this shit when they just kill for fun, Classy. This bitch enjoys it. Indara looked at her husband silently as he slumped back in his chair. She couldn't forgive Satora's death. Even with a motive, she'd never bring herself to understand, and she wanted to scream, wanted to lash out. All that separated her from that release was a lifetime of training. She had to be all that was best about the Tasu family. It was expected, every day of her life. There was a certain comfort knowing Adam could hold enough anger for both of them. Jama Jimenez looked over at Tom and stifled a chuckle. It wouldn't be polite, but the grin stayed nonetheless.
I told you to have a good time, lad, but did you nae have to bring home a souvenir with you?
She's a person, not a souvenir, Warwick replied as he slumped in his chair, looking abashed. Anyway, trust me, it wasn't on my mind. Surviving her, yes. Bringing her home, definitely not. Especially after the pool. Teasing the lad was fun. He could be an easy mark, a veritable babe in the shallows. Damn lucky Miver had found him, though. They were good for one another, and they deserved that. He had a good heart, and he always seemed in love with Miver. If his heart had room in it for someone as different as this Pezrin girl, it was only added to the proof. Fair and fair enough. It was easy to care about the dead civilizations in his collection, but care for the living was all the more important, and those who could do it were worth keeping safe. Not that he hadn't liked the boy already, but it was worth the knowing, all the same.
Aye, that's quite a story. You keep that sort of thing up and you'll be threatening to best my reputation.
And Charmer, you're the next incarnation of Indiana Jones, and you own the biggest brothel in the galaxy. Warwick took a sip of his tea. The lad was coming to like it, tolerably hot at least. I think your reputation is safe.
You still have to explain who that is, and I'm only part owner, a distant part at that.
Jarmer sniffed dismissively.
So, what are you going to do about her?
Do? You know, if you asked me this 10 years ago, I don't know how I'd have answered you. All that was before I got to know Mivere, Shalea, and all the girls. Today, I tell you that for every atrocity that hits the news, there are 10,000 small kindnesses no one is ever going to hear about. All the people that meet each other and love and care for one another, and no one ever knows. I have to think it all adds up. Warwick shrugged as he looked in his cup. In the end, I have to believe that's enough to include one Pezrin.
I still would ne'er be teaching her how to cook if I were you,
Jarmer muttered jovially, trying to lighten the mood. Warwick grimaced, and his hand reached down, rubbing his leg.
Perhaps that was a wee bit darker than I meant. Regardless, you're sure you can help me out the night after tomorrow? It's a small presentation, but it's been a while since I gave one. I'd welcome one run through it if you didn't mind.
Sure. 7 p.m. over at the amphitheatre. Not a problem, Tom nodded. He was a dutiful lad, and Jarmer almost felt a pang of guilt run through him for fooling him so. Almost. The boy needed to get off the fence and get the matter over with. And if this local custom Garnier told him about would do the deed, well and good. There would still be time to take the boy back to the tide pool before the real ceremony, wouldn't there just? Even if he had to ask forgiveness from Mivere later. I appreciate the chance to get out of the apartment and catch up, Jarmer. Miv is still acting a little funny around me, though given the whole eating me thing, I think I'm probably getting off light. Tom set his tea down and looked like he was starting to relax. I appreciate the company.
Any time, lad. You know, I ran across some interesting information about the Pezrin after I spoke with Miv the other day. You gave her quite a fright.
Jarmer arched an eyebrow at the boy.
Again.
I know, there wasn't any choice. Anyway, what information? I checked all through the datanet, even the guide. Jarmer watched as Tom cocked his head. The boy was getting it down well. I couldn't find very much.
Well then, I'm an archaeologist, but I do have a few contacts in sociology circles.
That was as close to the truth as Jarmer wanted to get with the lad, and he pressed on, swiping the file on his omnipad over to Warwick.
A friend of mine who specializes in alliance cultures sent me her notes.
Jarmer, is there anyone you don't... Tom's eyes widened as he opened the file and started to read. You've got to be putting me on.
Apparently they did it for survival, but, well, aye,
Jarmer chuckled.
Natural-born Torux rustlers, every single one of them. Seems before they left their homeworld, it was something between providing for their family, accruing honor, and the sport of choice.
They're cannibals and sneak thieves? Warwick was still looking over the file, shaking his head. Fuck me. I better get home.
Aye, that might nae be a bad choice,
Jarmer nodded sagely. Warwick was already halfway to the door. Just as well. He had to call Miv. The whole business was ready to go. It should only be a modest affair. Well, though maybe a few people should know. There were so many files. Most were only audio, but there were more than a few larger entries with video footage attached. The monitor displayed a bewildering array of hundreds of titles, and she scrolled through them at random. Ashokan Farewell was mysterious. Who was Ashokan, and why were they going away? Panzer lied. Battle of the Bulge was more promising. She had no idea who Panzer was or why they lied, but at least it involved a battle. Warwick had proven humans could use deception. Katyusha did not translate out of human at all, which seemed odd. Other titles seemed more promising. The Last Stand, The Lost Battalion, So Cold, Winterborn. That last will make a fine hunter's name, and while most of the titles made no sense, clearly these were all hunter's songs. The Battle Hymn of the Republic. She had no idea who the Republic humans were. Possibly another tribe like these Koreans, but that did not matter. She knew what a hymn was. Humans prayed for battle.
House. Display listings by most frequently played.
There was a chirp, and the files reorganized themselves, and she looked at the title at the top. The March of Cambreth. Well, how bad could human music be, really?
Display lyrics in Vatica, and play file.
Belda reclined on her bed, grinning from ear to ear as she broke the news to Liam. He hadn't been there when she dropped off the cake, thank the goddess. She'd asked him not to be, of course. She was already a wreck, and if he'd been there, something terrible might have happened. But she'd dropped off the cake, expressed her thanks, exchanged a few minutes of conversation, and then asked. All right. Hope had given her some very long looks, and there'd been at least one awkward silence that lasted longer than she really wanted to remember. But she said yes. She had the 6th date. They were officially a couple. She could send a message home, now. A real one. Empress. Her father would want to meet him at once, and her sisters. Well, they'd have to go to Willist. The hers took no notice of anything or anyone. Life moved around them, not the other way around. But the ranch had dozens of women. Her family could take little time off of the range, get to know him. She didn't dare talk to Liam about that now, though. She was still too busy blathering on to him about nothing, though at least it wasn't nothing. Thankfully, it was nothing with some news behind it, otherwise she'd sound like a complete idiot. There would be time to talk about where she was taking him for the date later. Right now, she just needed to calm down. She hugged the pillow to herself, clutching her omnipad. So Desi told Melondi and I, well, and the rest of the girls, that Professor Warwick is actually getting married the night after tomorrow. A real human wedding, but they're surprising him. Can you believe it? Is that a thing? Liam's voice came back over the audio connection. A surprise wedding? I know, isn't it romantic? They're going to sweep him off his feet. You have to come and be with me, please? Well, sure, I suppose. Liam sounded like he was chewing it over. He was probably already thinking of what to wear. Just how big is this going to be, Belle? Desi said they have the whole amphitheatre, so they must be expecting a big crowd. As long as Warwick doesn't find out, it's all good, right? Goddess, I want to grab Liam so hard right now I could scream. Anyway, I was talking to Bree, she's Kellogg's friend, and they work on the campus video blog together. I knew Lark was going to tell her, and she was so thankful because they hadn't gotten word to set up the video equipment. Can you believe it? Tom paused at his doorway. His rooms were nearly soundproof, and it wasn't like he had neighbours anyway. Still, there was some sound. What had she... Tom opened the door, and a scream of wailing bagpipes and caterwauling in Pedrin hit him like a wall of sound. He felt the blood drain from his face as the sickening implications washed over him, like a bucket of ice water. How has she found that? How has she broken the password? The sight was surreal. Apparently, Pedrin danced. If it wasn't dancing, he didn't know what else it could be, as Zinchiki threw herself around the living room, moving gracefully no matter how wildly she leapt, throwing out her arms and spinning like a top. Okay, she broke into my files. Figure it later. She doesn't speak any English, so there's probably no harm.
Rangt, hal nor, ikataiharakt.
Zinchiki threw her head back and yelled to the heavens.
How many of them can we make die?
Oh, fuck.